The voice of Husker Nation is on the air. This is Hail Varsity Radio. Insight, opinion, expertise, along with the biggest names talking Nebraska sports. Join in with the show at 402-489-1240 or 1-800-825-5865. Now, here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt and Elijah Herbel.
Great to have you in. It's Hail Varsity Radio. Signing Day 2024. Let's get it kicked off right with Husker MVP, two-time national champion, and a coach at Westside, and a proud papa right now with the Husker Network. Damon Benning joins us to get us going. Damon, congrats to Caleb, your family, man. How's the day been?
Oh, it's been a whirlwind. It's it reminds me of the first couple of weeks of the recruiting process, right? It feels really good, and there's this sense of, wow, this is really happening, and then the actual recruiting happens, and you're miserable. So today is like the first part of the courting process in recruiting, where it's like it all came to a culmination in about 30 minutes of signing time and doing a couple of radio hits this morning. So it was like, it's a sense of relief. I'm very, very proud. There's just a ton of emotions, but most of all, I'm just happy for Caleb because of the time and work that he's put in.
How did your emotions on your own signing day compare to how you feel today? Well, what is that difference between yourself signing and seeing your son sign?
Yeah, so that's funny. I literally just hung up the phone with my mom 5 minutes ago, and she just talked about how full her heart was and how happy, Grandpa would be for Caleb. And, they've been season ticket holders for 40 years. And I said, I know you think I'm going to say this, Mom, just because it's kind of my personality, but I don't really remember signing day being like that. And she goes, well, you're supposed to know how we felt when you signed. And I said, I didn't even know how I felt when I signed. So it's like, I don't remember the feeling like I do vividly, obviously experiencing it, 33 years later, as a parent. It's always better when it's your kids than things are with you. So I can't even really describe what I felt like compared to what he feels. I just know that he's serious when he says, the recruiting process was very, very difficult. I loved the brevity of today, right? That just, it typifies his personality, so I'm stoked.
Damon Benning's with us here on Hail Varsity as Caleb, part of the 2024 class. And Damon, I want to get your takeaway. You've been able to see up close all season long Coach Rule and this team. You've also seen what they're about in the recruiting process.
Yeah.
And give us your impression of what Nebraska has in their head coach.
Yeah, so it's really funny now that it's kind of over, because early on in December and January and February, I almost had to pinch myself sometimes to make sure I felt like he was the type of guy that was playing checkers and I was playing chess. Because this wasn't even really about the recruiting process yet. This was just me getting to know him as a person, as kind of being in the media. Mm-hmm. We were going to do this 90-minute sit-down that ultimately didn't end up happening until the summer. But along those lines, I'm like, he's unbelievable. He's authentic. He's a quick blinker. He's very self-aware. He was almost too good to be true. And then once he kind of ramped up the recruiting process, it's further, I'm like, okay, I feel validated, like I'm not crazy. And then I've watched his teams respond, from a working standpoint, right? With the network, I'm thinking, wow, you've got some guys that are all in now. Ty Robinson, Luke Reimer, Nick Henrich. You've got this proof of concept in Tommy Hill, how you've got him to kind of turn the corner. It was being validated almost daily with the life lessons that he's teaching. And then culminating, a couple of weeks ago with the in-home visit where he stayed till almost midnight. I'm just thinking he's everything that he says he is, because it's modeled behavior. It's not just the words. He's actually modeling kind of what he's after in terms of leading young people. So I couldn't be happier. And I'm telling you, whether it's trying to explain going for a fake kick from the 50-yard line, or he's telling you about what he had for dinner, it's authentic. It's so you just take that all in, whether it's things that we love and we agree with, or things where we kind of scratch our head. He's transparent, and I think that is going to serve him well in the long haul.
I want to go to the in-home visit. Did you watch a ball game? Did you hang out? Did you talk? Did you grill? What'd you serve?
Yeah, so it was, it was kind of impromptu. He was originally coming on Tuesday, but he said there were only a couple of non-early enrollee guys that he was going to do in-homes with, and so he wanted to make sure that he had time. So he called on Thursday and said, hey, we got a wide open day tomorrow. We're not on the road. Are you okay with that if we come watch basketball? Coach Cooper wants to watch him play. And I said, so, and I'm going to just ask the questions. I said, so, are you meaning the in-home too? And he said, yeah. So I'm panicking, right, because you got to get the house ready. I have no idea what we're eating. All these things go through my mind. I just was trying to figure out how to say yes and then call and break the news to my wife later on at school, right? So it's like he comes to he's at the Gretna game, and it's a huge game. It's a big rivalry, and the team plays well, and he's kind of critiquing it along the way and plays that he likes. And the whole time he's like, man, I just want to get out there and play 2-on-2. He's like, if you can get Caleb to play, he said, you take Coop, I'll take Caleb. If you guys win, I'll let Caleb wear whatever number he wants. And I'm like, don't tempt me. But that's just the kind of guy he is. Obviously, he's joking. But, then he goes down and, he shoots the breeze with the student section, and he takes pictures, and he has the Go Big Red chanting in the gym. Like, he just owned the gymnasium. And he ended up beating us back to our house. And so we had, some wings and smoked pastrami, and we had some pizza from Paisans, and he loved the food. And, it's probably 10:30, and I'm thinking he's ready to go, and Furman and Montana's going on, and so we start watching the game, and he's asking Caleb about play calls, and Coach Coop is like, what defense would you play here? And they're just going back and forth, and it's just funny, Coach Rule would ask offensive questions, and Coach Cooper would ask defensive questions. And Coach Rule's like, yeah, I don't know, man. Coop, he sounds like an offensive guy. And Coop's like, yeah, right. This guy's defense through and through. Look at the way he likes to hit, this, that, and the other. And so it turned into it got a lot more lighthearted, where we get to see, you peel back the onions a little bit in terms of how people are thinking. And so we talk situational defense, and it was cool. And before you know it, it's midnight, and they're getting out of the house. But he was just everything you kind of thought from the periphery, and then some when you peeled it back.
Damon, I love the way you're phrasing this of peeling back the onion. I want to peel back the onion a little bit on Matt Rule, the competitor, because he makes that offer to play 2-on-2 in basketball. Maybe he's kidding, maybe he's not. You don't necessarily see that in the press conferences because Matt Rule's so affable whenever he's up there in front of the media, but yeah. You see him on the sideline, and you see him in recruiting, and you see him playing ping pong with guys. The dude's a competitor, and I'm not sure it always comes across that way whenever he gets up in front of the media and speaks to people. Can you speak on that, Matt Rule, the competitor?
Yeah. He's unbelievable. I was joking with him when Tony White was at the high school the other day. He wanted to watch basketball practice, but he wanted to play horse. And so I text Coach Rule. I'm like, I said, is this the competition just runs rampant? Like, he really wants to play horse. And Coach Rule he totally skipped over the fact that his coach is all in engaging with student athletes. He said, tell him he can't beat me with his trick knee. I'll play him anytime. Right? It doesn't matter what he does. And I'm telling you, at the end of the day, it's not just the relationship that he was building within the walls of our home. It was the fact that he is so competitive that I think eventually won the house over. People that know us would say we're probably closer to the competitive side than not. And if it's truly survival of the fittest and next man up and, you earn your keep and you get to eat what you kill, like that's in our wheelhouse, right? Like we want the chance to compete. And it's just ideal, but it's exactly who he is. So it 100% works.
Couple more minutes. Damon Benning with his signing day 2024, Hail Varsity Radio. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel. You mentioned the topic of competition. Damon, he was asked about that in regards to Dylan Raiola and a nice, better than nice, monster get for Nebraska at a marquee spot, arguably the marquee spot in football. And Dom pretty well. And
yeah.
Are you amazed at this process, or did you think the door was always open?
Well, so for the first couple of months after the commitment to Georgia, I thought this ship has sailed. But, last Sunday, I started to think that there was a chance where, Dom had called in the morning, and then we were kind of texting back and forth that Sunday. And I'm like, whoa, like, is he trying to tell me something? He's asked a ton of insightful questions, like, what are we getting at here? So, truth be told, full disclosure, and I joked with Dom about this week, like, I ran and told. I was like, hey, Coach, like, Dom is totally asking me 1,000 questions. Like, I don't even know what this means. I kind of feel like, some giddy school guy, right? Mm-hmm. But, I'm an Android, he's an Apple guy, and so I sent it over to him, and I could see the emphasize. Mm-hmm. Coach wrote emphasize, the message. So I was like, oh, wow, this maybe caught him off guard, too. Like, maybe there is something to this. And by Monday, when it got super hot and heavy, I'm like, yeah, there's definitely something to this.
Your reaction for Nebraska as somebody that played and wants to see this place get back to where it's been?
I'm pumped. It's just something cool. Dom said something cool the other day. He just was like, hey, I get all the comparisons. Eric and some of these guys came to see him on Saturday with T. Fraze, and he goes, it would be cool if a Benning and Raiola could get some wins in a recruiting class like Benning and Frazier. And while the two aforementioned aren't near probably, well, one of the guys that's mentioned with me is a lot better than the guy that he's mentioned with, and the two younger guys still got a ways to go. But the comparison was cool nonetheless. It just gave me chills.
It's Damon Benning with us here, our signing day special on Hail Varsity Radio. And Damon, I'll get your thoughts on some of the news of the day. There was a Miami Flare with some surprise flips today. Well, maybe surprise isn't the right word to use, but Miami Flare nonetheless. What's your take on that? The coaching staff going down to Miami? I know you probably played with some guys from the state of Florida and from Miami. What is that fit like, and were those names surprises to you?
Yeah, I think as kind of the week wore on, they weren't as big of surprises, but I do like the fact that people are very, very intrigued and want to be surrounded by what's going on at Nebraska. And when you can start to do work in the state of Florida and get some guys to kind of change their mind later on and know that they're moving far from home, like that's a big deal. So I'm excited, right? The more the merrier, and I think he's going to give this thing a chance to work.
Damon, we'll get you out on this, and you've been around the high school scene for a number of years. Speak to the in-state talent that Nebraska was able to haul a number of Nebraska kids in a really another good year for Nebraska high school athletes, not only finding their way to Lincoln, but other prominent locations.
Yeah, he's got 8 total, and, the top, depending on the rankings, 4 or 5 guys in the class all to say yes. That's a big deal, and that's obviously where it has to start. And I think he's done a good job. It's important to him. It's been important to him. I think they've worked their tail off, making their presence felt across the state, and hopefully it can continue to pay dividends. Your
reaction to how Danny Kalen's handled all this?
He's a pro's pro, all right? Tough deal. The emotions that he's ran since January, the decommit late for Missouri, then coming back to Nebraska, being an early enrollee, then having things expedited the way that they were in this last week. I think he's done and said all the right things. And you got to remember, he's 18 years old, and so wearing it on his sleeve and out loud, listen, he's human. And more than he's human, he hasn't had some of the life experiences. So I couldn't be any more proud of DK and how he's kind of handled this.
You're celebrating tonight how?
I think I'm just going to make sandwiches, right? Like some chicken cheese steaks, maybe just kind of hang out and be quiet. My 13-year-old has got another half day of school, and Caleb finished his finals today, so it should be pretty easy going.
It's nice enough out to grill, just saying.
I thought about it, but that's coming probably tomorrow night. I got a nice tenderloin that I only paid about $7.19 a pound for, so that might be tomorrow.
Text me the address. Yeah.
Or just text me who your meat man is. I need to know who your meat man is.
Yeah. If you're making tenderloin, we're there. We'll bring the sides. It's big of us. Damon Benning with us here on Hail Varsity. Damon, best you and the fam. Thanks for a few minutes today.
I appreciate it. Anytime, guys.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Back with you at Hail Varsity. We're powered by Cornhead Lager. Thanks to Damon Benning for getting us kicked off on signing day 2024. Mike Babcock with us now from Hail Varsity. Hurrdat Sports. Bill Doleman joins us. Evan Bland and Mike Schaefer. Next hour, we are efforting a couple of commits from this class. We'll also hear from Dylan Raiola and Mr. Matt Rule, his presser today. So a lot to get to in the next couple of hours. Roll call real quick. We do this. Jeff was in, Morgan, Anthony, Brian, Brennan, 1 through 5, and many more. We'll get to your stream comments. Babbers, another signing day. Let's talk reaction here. 8 Nebraskans, 5 Floridians, and 5 from the Lone Star State. Total of 26. What do you think?
I think that's good, what you just mentioned. In addition to getting the Nebraska guys, you got 5 from Florida and 5 from Texas. I think that shows the effort that this coaching staff has put into the recruiting class, and I think it's the value of what recruiting is for Nebraska, and to be able to get the best players or most of the best players from in-state. And then also be able to get states like Florida and Texas in the mix. I think that's really important for Nebraska. You have to go that way.
Mike, a point I brought up on our show yesterday, and I want to get your thoughts on, is do you think this class resembles the successful Husker classes of old, where you're really locked down not only the state borders, but the 500-mile radius as a whole? There's a big 500-mile radius flare with Kansas, Colorado, Montana, if you consider that part of the 500-mile radius.
The Rockies, right?
Iowa. That 500-mile radius well represented. Then, as you said, you go across the country to Texas, to Florida, to the East Coast as well, North Carolina. You'll pick and choose your spots across the country to bring in some other guys. Does that remind you of recruiting classes of old?
Well, yeah. One of those states that Nebraska did well in, I think, was California. It was able to bring in some guys from California, and Texas was always a good state for Nebraska. I think that it became more difficult, with the creation of the Big 12, obviously more difficult now in the Big 10. But, it does. It's the kind of mix that you have to have, I think. Stay close to home in the 500-mile radius, as you mentioned, but also you've got to have these areas where you bring in these players. Being in the Sugar Bowl a couple of times enabled Nebraska to get some guys from Louisiana. Being in the Orange Bowl obviously facilitated the Florida guys that Nebraska was able to recruit, and then there was a good connection that went clear back to towards the end of Devaney's tenure as coach to California, because Nebraska was very aggressive there in the late 60s of getting junior college players especially from California and in the West. And those players played significant roles in Nebraska's national championship run.
Mike Babcock's with us from Hail Varsity and Hurrdat Sports. Get his subscription to Mike's bi-weekly newsletter at Mike B at hurrdatsports.com. So I got to ask you about the Raiola buzz nationally, locally, and the thought of, his opportunity, the talent walking in that door for Nebraska. The quarterback spot is as good based on his pedigree since what? Frazier, since Gill. How do you kind of put words to it, Mike, with what Nebraska could have in Raiola?
Well, you had the recruiting class that included Eric Crouch and Bobby Newcomb. Bobby played as a true freshman as a receiver and then competed with Eric for the quarterback job. That was a big deal. One thing that I remember a lot of talk about was the recruitment of Harrison Beck out of Clearwater, Florida.
Yes.
That was in 2005. That 2005 recruiting class, Harrison Beck was a 4-star recruit. It included 2 5-star recruits, Marlon Lucky and Zachary Bowman, who was a transfer from New Mexico Military Institute, junior college. I counted these up for the newsletter. I think of 31 signees on the list on Letter of Intent Day. 11 of them were 4 stars, and then the 2 5-star ones. So that was a pretty big deal back in 2005. But the thing that I remember most was there was just a lot of discussion about Harrison Beck, and was he going to come here? And once he made a commitment, that was it. Bill Callahan said, "I'm not looking at any more quarterbacks. He's the guy." And like Zach Taylor was in that class as well.
Thank God.
We know how the Harrison. They brought in Zach just to push him to be better, and he pushed him so hard that he pushed him right out. And Zach was a really good quarterback. But this is probably about Tommy Frazier. That was a big deal. I think it looked like he was going to commit to Colorado, and then Colorado got another quarterback whose name I forget, but
Coy Detmer.
Detmer, yeah, okay. And then it kind of came down to Nebraska and Clemson, I think, with Tommy. But that was a good get for Nebraska, obviously. And Turner Gill, it kind of came down to Nebraska and Oklahoma with Turner, and that was always a big battle recruiting when Nebraska and Oklahoma actually went head to head. That Nebraska would get a guy that Oklahoma was going after. I think same thing with Mickey Joseph. Actually, I think it came down to Nebraska and Oklahoma with him. Those were the days. But you didn't have social media, and you didn't have all the discussion that goes on the internet, and all the publicity that goes along with being a 5-star quarterback and making a decommit from a team that just won a national championship to come to Nebraska. So this is about as good as it gets in terms of what Nebraska is able to accomplish in recruiting.
Mike, I want to get your thoughts on the Miami flair that is in this class. A couple of flips today from the city of Miami, and I think there's 5 different guys in the class from the city of Miami. What's your take on that? Miami's been a place that Nebraska's gone to before in terms of the grander history of Husker football. It's been a little bit since there's been success. You remember that class of guys back in, I believe, 2018, where none of those Florida guys ended up sticking around. So not as much recent success down there. What's your thoughts on Nebraska going back to Miami in this class of 2024?
I think it's important, as I said, and I also think, there's when Dylan Raiola makes a commitment to Nebraska, or when there's all this discussion going on via the internet again, I think that at any school, when you get a 5-star guy like that, or there's talk of a 5-star guy that maybe was going to come to your school, it brings in guys from other places. You get other players committing that you wouldn't have gotten otherwise. And I think that the Florida thing is probably partly that. A couple guys changed. And why did they change? Because there was discussion. My guess is there was at least some of the influence was discussion of Raiola and was he going to decommit from Georgia and come to Nebraska. And that's the other thing, that not only do you get him, but you get other players of a high quality that are taking a look at your program because one guy begets others.
Mike, we'll get your take on the legacy part of this discussion where you have a lot of really talented former Huskers having their sons choose Nebraska, and really a who's who list of guys that Papa Bear performed on the field, a lot of rings won, a lot of New Year's Day bowl games, a lot of high NFL draft picks and long NFL careers. Now it's Junior's turn.
Yeah, I think that's pretty cool. The thing is, I'm sure that in most cases the father said, do what you think is best for you. Don't make a decision entirely based on the fact that I played there and I had this kind of success. Do what you think is best. But, they come out and decide they think it's best for them. And so they make the decision to come here. And it's always good, I think, when you have that kind of a situation. And the numbers this year, what did we have? A half dozen?
Yeah, you had total. Five? Five.
Yep. Okay, 5. Yeah. I think again that speaks well for your program, because I don't believe that the father was necessarily saying you got to go there because that's where I went. And in some cases, I think student athletes say, I don't want to go there because I don't want the pressure of expectation because of what my father did. But in this case, we got 5 that said, hey, we're going to do it. And I think that's good. I like that.
Mike, as the young guy in the room, can you give me a Ken Clark memory? I feel like those other guys maybe a little bit closer to my time, and Ken's son Quinn obviously in the class here, Ken passing away 10 years ago here in a couple of months. And I want to get your memories of him, because that's a guy that I don't think, at least among the younger fans, has been passed
incredible.
down.
He was incredible.
He was. He was on the cover of the Media Guide his senior year. I mean, that's how good he was. And it was kind of a question of, he didn't necessarily have all the players around him that was going to put you in the national championship discussion, but he was kind of he kind of led the charge. And really during Tom Osborne's 25 seasons as head coach, just about every season you could find us at some point in the season, Nebraska was in a position where you thought, hey, it could play for a national championship. But yeah, Ken Clark, that's how good he was. He was on the cover of the Media Guide. That takes a lot.
Kenny Clark outdueled Barry Sanders one October day in 1988. And then Ken Clark's story I heard from Eric Dickerson, because Kenny was the backup back to Dickerson when he got traded to Indy. This is the late 80s. So Clark would drive whatever Eric wasn't driving in Eric's garage. Dickerson told me. So, and it may have been the infamous A&M Gold Trans Am once in a while. This was 100 years ago. We talked to Eric Dickerson, but he had just fond memories of the late great Ken Clark. So
sad. It's passing.
Yeah, absolutely sad. Mike, good day for the Big Red. Thanks for sharing some thoughts on signing day with us, and we'll check in with you in the new year, bud.
Yeah, it makes me feel old when I see tons of players that I
experienced, right? Experienced.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
There he is, Mike Babcock at MD Babs on Twitter. Big thanks to Mike. Signing day 2024 rolls forward. Pride of Fairbury. NBC Sports' Bill Doleman joins us next on Hail Varsity.
He's the Pride of Fairbury, an average Joe. Bill Doleman, the professor.
I had a 6 ACT in 1967. One time I got an A and my grandma beat me for cheating.
Now with Hail Varsity Radio.
Signing day 2024 rolls forward. We welcome in the Pride of Fairbury, NBC Sports, the professor, Bill Doleman. As Billy D, in all the years we've done radio, this may be the first signing day we have you on. And, man, it's been quite a signing day to track and follow, and all that ink is dry. What a job by Rule and Company, landing 26 for this class.
Well, thank you for having me on, because you know how much I love high school football recruiting.
You've been the most measured, capital M with the measured sportscaster I've known ever when it comes to no cart before horse.
Well, hey, look, I don't want to take any credit for Zach Taylor, right? I just heard Mike Babcock a little while ago talk about the the recruitment and the excitement people around Nebraska had for Harrison Beck. And I remember that you and I, and perhaps a couple of others, we were watching some video about back in the day when you could get a look at a recruit, and then you started to look a little deeper at just what that resume really probably looked like and what Nebraska might be getting. And so we were a little critical about the pursuit of Harrison Beck. So we'll take credit for Zach Taylor coming to Nebraska, just because of our recruiting analysis was so astute back then.
Well, I'm sure, next time we talk to Zach, he'll say, "Yep, you guys, you got me to Lincoln."
And then in turn,
we got the Bengals in the Super Bowl.
That's what I was going to say. I was
willed
going
it
to
to happen.
I was going to say, with the butterfly effect, you got Zach Taylor, the head coaching gig with the Cincinnati Bengals.
Because we started to dive into the stars a little bit more deeply than others did. And we saw something they didn't, and we, raised the alarm. But football recruiting, it is a national, I don't want to say a holiday, but it certainly has become an entity all to its own, not just one day. But my gosh, recruiting for 2025 has started already, and Matt Rule said he's going to give his guys a bit of a break, and then they'll ramp up 25 when they all come back. And by the way, there's a football season to prepare for as well.
Well, Bill, it's interesting today we're bringing up Harrison Beck and Zach Taylor. I mean, you could make you could make the parallel that Nebraska with a 2-quarterback class this year, early in a tenure, they got the sought-after guy. They also have the guy waiting in the wings that's expected to push the guy that's expected to be the top. But this year, it feels a little different than Harrison Beck and Zach Taylor, yeah?
Yeah, there's no question. Look, I'm not naive, and I'm going to downplay the day. It's a really big deal for Nebraska to get Dylan Raiola, and I think it's a really big deal for Daniel Kalen for Nebraska to stick with Daniel Kalen, allow him to perhaps explore other opportunities, which that was in the headlines the last few days. But then for him to come back, I think it speaks to his character and the character of the program that he sees what has been laid out before him. He knows who's coming in. Nebraska's been honest with him, and he wants to be a part of the program. And who knows, he may grow into becoming a fantastic college quarterback that could have a great impact at the University of Nebraska. And the same could be said for Dylan Raiola or whoever they might bring in the next few weeks or months to play quarterback at Nebraska.
Bill Doleman's with us. Find him on Twitter at Bill Doleman. And Bill, you kind of nailed this 2 weeks ago, well, less than 2 weeks ago, when it comes to the Nebraska factor. You've touched on family, and Rule divulged that today when it came to that Sunday phone call from Dylan to Coach Rule.
Yeah, we talked about it on the show. I guess it was last week, and I really firmly believe it. And I think I said at the time that this thing with Dylan Raiola goes back years, and it's been a lifetime probably dream for him to be able to do what he did today, even though he was courted by everybody around the country. But there's something special about the state of Nebraska and the relationship that the Raiolas, the family, Dominic, Yvonne, Dayton, and probably even Taylor, the sister. They probably all have a relationship with the state of Nebraska because of the experience Dom had, when he played here back in the 1990s and early 2000s. And that's always left an impression. And I think it's interesting when they talk about Nebraska being home to Dylan and to the Raiolas. I don't know when they've lived here, other than Dom's time as a college student in Nebraska. So what this state meant to him as a college student and as a collegiate athlete, the impact that Tom Osborne had on him, I think has been a lifelong thing for him. And so it didn't surprise me that when, word got out that he was circling back and and talking to Matt Rule and company that this was probably where he was going to end up being. I think, look, this is still a state where the handshake is a contract, okay? And Matt Rule talked about, wouldn't you love to be the head of the Ainsworth Travel and Tourism Department today?
Come crash a wedding and have a bourbon.
We are all Ainsworth, right? But, I think every small town in Nebraska and Lincoln and Omaha too can say, yeah, we get it. We understand that. We understand why he enjoys going up there and meeting, the real people of the state. And again, that's not to say they're not real in Lincoln and Omaha, but there's something about the handshake in the small town around here that still means something. And I think people who come here understand that. And I think the Raiolas have always felt that. And I think that they're a very proud family that their son recognizes how special this place can be and how they will treat him. And I think that he'll be very respectful of that.
Bill, obviously this Raiola flip speaks a lot to what Nebraska means to the Raiolas, but I think it also speaks to the culture within the building that Matt Rule's been able to establish in his first 12 months on the job. Can you speak on that for a second? Just this change in philosophy down at One Memorial Drive that has occurred under Matt Rule that's kind of led Dylan Raiola back to Nebraska and ensured that it's the right place for him?
Well, look, I'm going to go back to, the talk about the state. I think when Matt Rule came in to visit, remember he came in with his wife and they took in the Illinois game or something and realized, wait a minute, this isn't just a football stadium surrounded by cornfields. And he understood in just a weekend that this is a very unique place, okay? And then he takes the job and he lays out his vision. And over the past year, as he and his staff have crisscrossed the state, and probably met Nebraskans from coast to coast and border to border and realized, as he has said, there's a real responsibility here. So I think that Nebraska has left an indelible impact on him over the last year, and I think Nebraska has embraced who he is, and I think it's been a terrific relationship over the last year. And I think all of that has borne out in the relationships that were created to put this recruiting class together, which I believe is a very impressive class. And to see the Floridians, remember, we've been told nobody wants to go to Nebraska. Well, there's 5 kids from Florida, and a few of them have stuck to their commitment for a long time, despite a lot of pressure to get them to flip and stay home in Miami. You've got 8 players from Texas that have all embraced and understood that, that's a staff that believes in the state that it represents, the program it represents, the people it represents. I want to go be a part of that. So I think it's been a terrific match that both Matt Rule and Nebraska, the relationship and the impact they've had on each other, and that's why you have a pretty solid recruiting class today.
Bill Doleman, signing day 2024, Hail Varsity Radio. Bill, hang on for us. We'll get you to take us to the top of the hour here on the other side if you got a couple of minutes.
Sure.
We'll put a bow on this first hour and get to some of your stream comments on Hail Varsity. We're powered by Cornhead Lager, 489-1240, number to get in. Chris at HailVarsity.com to email.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
One final time this hour, Hail Varsity Signing Day 2024, powered by Cornhead Lager. Reminder to get buckled up this holiday season, hands on the wheel, eyes in focus, straight ahead. The driver has one job, to drive. This message from the NDOT Highway Safety Office. Bill Doleman with us to round out this first hour. Bill, we've talked about Florida, Texas, the in-state talent with the Nebraska kids. Of course, Dylan Raiola committing and flipping. As we look forward with this second class now for Matt Rule, do you think this could be one of those turn-the-corner classes? You've seen those before in your time covering Nebraska.
Yeah, I do. I think with the foundation that's been laid in the state of Nebraska, I think that's pretty significant. There will be attrition. What they signed 47 players today, something like that, close to 60. Eventually, there will be a couple who will leave. But if you can make sure that you have that foundation in place in Nebraska, as good as the talent in this state is getting, I think that's a pretty significant thing that will continue to deepen the roots, replant the roots back in this state. To get quality players out of Florida and Texas is significant. I was a little surprised that there was nothing very little talk about California other than the Baker kid who ended up at Texas. But they don't seem to be fazed by the fact that there was nothing done out in California. And maybe that's by design. This is going to be a Midwest and Southeast, East Coast heavy program. But, yeah, with a benchmark player like a Dylan Raiola and some of the other quality players along the offensive line, how about you got Pile of Bricks? Bricks
Yes.
And was Pile's last name? Our first name
Gibson.
Yeah. Pile. Yeah. I mean, boy, they got some great offensive line names, but those guys, I think to have an offensive line built over 2 years, I think now that's going to be really significant. So I think that the offensive line success last year and this year will really transform, I think, this program and give it depth.
Hey, don't forget Alexander Rugaroli, another great offensive line name.
Out of Vegas, and you're getting him as a walk-on from Bishop Gorman. I'll tell you what, a lot's been made, and rightfully so, about Coach Donnie and Dylan, but from day one, from the jump, Bill, Bricks was a target for Donnie Raiola, and he got his man out of Iowa when the rest of the Big Ten and the SEC wanted him.
Yeah, doesn't it sound like Donovan? Everybody wanted Dylan Raiola, and Donnie Raiola wanted Grant Bricks.
Well, wanted both, but yeah, get me
Give
Bricks.
that guy a raise.
Get me Bricks now and get this semi out to his stadium.
Yeah, so Donovan Raiola, I think, has been very good, and I know the players in his room love him. And I think that was a significant hire, whether it was strategic to get his nephew here, let that play out. But Donovan Raiola, I think, has been a real find for this coaching staff. And I think really last year with the offensive line players they're able to get in, especially locally, and then the offensive line, it appears as though they've assembled this year. That's really, really a big deal for this program. And they sprinkled it in with some speed, and I think we're going to see the benefits next year.
Should be all right. Can't wait for a year or two if you're a Nebraska fan. Bill, we'll grab a whiskey before you head off for the holiday break, all right?
That sounds good to me. All right,
that.
Sounds good.
We'll get the whiskey and cigars going. Pride of Fairbury, Bill Doleman. Bill, thank you.
All right, see you.
There he is. Bill Doleman with us. Appreciate him, as always. Mike Babcock as well this hour. Damon Benning. Next hour, Mike Schaefer, 24/7 Sports. Evan Bland on the way.
The voice of Husker Nation is on the air. This is Hail Varsity Radio. Insight, opinion, expertise, along with the biggest names talking Nebraska sports. Join in with the show at 402-489-1240 or 1-800-825-5865. Now, here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt and Elijah Herbel.
Welcome to it, signing day 2024, hour 2 with Hail Varsity Radio, powered by Cornhead Lager. Will sounds like Chubba is on the move. Brian checks in on the stream. Can always watch the show, Hail Varsity YouTube channel, Hail Varsity Radio Twitter feed at HVarsity Radio. Brian says this: I'm now convinced that if Matt Rule was a member of the Delta Tau Chi fraternity, he would have been president by his third year. No horses would have been harmed or died. He would have been. It would have been the top frat GPA. And you know what? The movie wouldn't have happened like it did. So everything that Rule has touched has turned to gold. This signing class, we welcome in with 24/7 Sports Mike Schaefer at Mike J. Schaefer on Twitter. Schaefer, take a deep breath, man. Signing day is done. How are you?
Good. I don't know. Do I do a Bill Belichick thing here where it's just like we're on to 25? We're on to 25.
You've got to grunt.
We're on to 25.
You got to grunt a little more to be
25.
To be Belichickian. But no,
I'd like to hear Bill Belichick say 2-5 crew, though. That seems to be the hashtag for the next one. 2-5 crew just for some reason sounds like it'd be funny coming out of Belichick's mouth.
It would be hard to imagine him going down that. Can you imagine an in-home visit with Bill Belichick, by the way? Like he's supposed to sell someone from the transfer portal to come play quarterback for him. Like It's hard to imagine.
He would also add a Y to the end of your name, Mikey, Chrissy. I don't know how we do it. Well, I mean, he called Tim Tebow Timmy for years. Well, Timmy, I'd really rather you not do this multi-million-dollar endorsement deal. You may not make the team, Timmy. So let's talk real quick, Chubba Purdy, before we get into your thoughts on the class. Schaefer, you've got a report out from Arizona 360, and this is from Brad Sesmat. That says Chubba has decided to enter the transfer portal. This has been retweeted by mom, dad, and sister. Not really that surprising if Chubba moves on, given the state of the quarterback room, although Rule pretty emphatic today that he wanted the guys that helped this season get navigated, have a shot to win the job. And if they're going to have to compete, it was guys below them in class. What do you think about Purdy being a grad transfer here, graduating in December, and potentially moving on?
Yeah, it's really interesting because I would view it as a potential good fit for both sides for him to just sort of play out the string. And the reason I feel that way, I don't think Chubba Purdy is going to go be a Power 5 starter somewhere else. To me, if he wants to play at this level, he's going to be a backup quarterback. If he wants to get as many snaps as he can get, he's going to the FCS or Group of 5. I mean, I think his upside is that as being a competent backup quarterback that you can bring in at a moment's notice and he can kind of run around and do some things. But I don't think he's ever going to be a game manager. I don't think he's ever going to be a guy that you can install for 8 games and can get you through the season. I think that we got the best version of what he could be at times in that Wisconsin game and in that Iowa game, and it's still flawed. And that's not to say that he, needs to leave or that he has to pursue other opportunities. It's just that I think his ceiling is pretty limited, but I think his floor is still pretty high. And so because of that, I like the idea of him as a potential backup quarterback for Dylan Raiola. I mean, I am not treating this, and Matt Rule might want to. He might want to tell us all the time that this is an open quarterback competition. I, Mike Schaefer, am not treating it as such. Mm-hmm. Dylan Raiola didn't come to Nebraska to sit behind Chubba Purdy or Heinrich Haarberg. Matt Rule didn't talk about the San Francisco 49ers offense today, and that's what they want it to look like. It never looked like that when Heinrich Haarberg was the starting quarterback this year. So that's not a real thing that's going to happen. I mean, I know the last name's Purdy, but there's really no similarities between Brock and Chubba as quarterbacks either. So to me, I mean, it's very much Dylan Raiola's job. It's, can Nebraska find someone to help push him? And can Nebraska find someone that can be a competent backup should they need it? And I think they have that guy in Chubba, and I think they would like to try to keep him if they can. But I could also understand why he wants to go find an alternative where he could play more. But I just don't think that's going to happen at the Power 5 level. So if you're Nebraska, I think the argument for it is, hey, we've got a good situation for you here. You tell him that he's competing for the job. But more than likely, I think everyone knows that it would be as a backup. And if he's not comfortable with that, then he's going to have to move on. And Nebraska's going to have to try to find someone in the portal. I mean, the difficulty of navigating the Dylan Raiola thing, on one hand, you're getting a 5-star quarterback and a number, the number 1 quarterback on 24/7 Sports rankings right now. On the other, it's not particularly easy to convince older players to come in and compete against this when he's already the most popular recruit and most popular player on the team. This isn't an easy scenario. And I think Matt Rule is really going to have to work to try to sell that there's a competition and to try to bring in someone that would compete in that scenario as well. So it's a big deal. Nebraska really needs to have a veteran quarterback in that room. Opposite of Dylan and Danny Kalen and Heinrich Haarberg. I think Chubba would be a good fit there.
Is that veteran maybe Casey Thompson?
There's been conversation of it, but based on what we've heard lately, I don't think that's likely to happen. I think that might have been an alternative, but I don't know that that's the route that things are going to go at this point in time. And I don't know that they necessarily needed to, but that would be more along the lines of someone that I think, like Chubba, isn't going to take the job away, but could give you a competent backup. Now, the problem with Casey is he's not going to play this spring. So, I don't see a lot of value in bringing him in as someone that's competing for a role because he can't practice. So it's, and it also doesn't have like there's other guys out there that they could certainly go to. But the reason that you like Chubba is he's already in your system. He already knows these players. And so I think they're certainly going to try to keep him. It's just going to come down to what he ultimately wants out of his college football experience.
Mike, what is your comfort level with Dylan Raiola, true freshman starting quarterback? That hasn't been traditional in college football, but it's kind of been the way of the world, both in the NFL and in college recently, that these high-level guys are given a shot early. What's your comfort level with him being not only a starter, but a presumptive starter if there isn't competition that's brought in?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not super comfortable with it because this is a big year. They need to win games. They let 2023 get by without getting to a bowl game, failing essentially at 5-7. And I don't personally believe that they're going to deserve to get a pass for if they struggle in 2024 if you're starting a true freshman quarterback, because you also sort of line this up as well. So that doesn't mean like I'm holding anyone's feet to the fire. What I'm just trying to say is that there's a big opportunity and a runway for them early in the season to put some wins together. But you also know if a young guy, you're going to have some growing pains. And so they're going to have to be able to work through that. And I think one of the ways that they can is you try to build your roster out as much as you possibly can. He's going to have a veteran offensive line for the most part, but he doesn't have, I think, particularly great skill position players around him. So, you're asking a lot of a true freshman quarterback where you don't have, your next most experienced wide receiver is I guess Alex Bullock or Malachi Coleman or James Lloyd. Like that's not a great picture for a true freshman starting quarterback. I mean, when you think of guys who have had a lot of success doing this, it's usually because they're surrounded by a bunch of talent. And asking him to have to be the son is exactly how Nebraska got into problems in 2018, the last time they had a true freshman starting quarterback in Adrian Martinez. So I think Nebraska still has to work the portal. I think they have to try to find some veterans that they can add on offense. But yeah, my comfort level isn't particularly high with it, but that doesn't matter. I mean, we know where this is headed. And so it's, can they put enough around Dylan that you can manage through those growing pains? And I think they can. Like, I don't want this to come off as pessimistic. It's a huge day for Nebraska. It's a great day. There you have a 5-star quarterback in the fold. But the reality is he has never played a snap of college football, and he is going to get the keys to the kingdom. And you have to hope that it goes well, and you have to give him the best chance to be successful early on.
It's Mike Schaefer with his 24/7 Sports at Mike J. Schaefer on Twitter. Schaefer, overall impression of this class, 26 total, a handful more of talented walk-ons. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is an exciting group. There's a lot of interesting parts of this class. I thought last year in 2023 in that cycle, they did a great job rebuilding their defensive line, and we saw that play out with guys like Cameron Lenhart and Riley Van Poppel and Prince Will and Sua Lefotu, and we'll see it with Vincent Carroll Jackson this spring. And, they did similar with the offensive line this year. I really feel like that, beyond Dylan, the other part of this class that I think really stands out, they took 6 offensive linemen when you add in Alexander Ruggiero, who's on an NIL scholarship. And they have guys in Grant Bricks and Preston Talmua that are really talented linemen as well. And then they have some developmental types in Jake Peters and Landon Davidson that could be pretty good. And then they have a guy in Gibson Pyle that nobody talks about that, got invited and is going to go play in the All-American Bowl. And I think he's probably one of the more underrated pieces of this class. So I really like what they did in the trenches. And that extends over to the tight end position too, where they got Carter Nelson, and he is a absolute freak athlete, but is going to need some time to learn, first learn 11-man football and just continue to sort of grow into an actual position, whereas he played a lot of different things for Ainsworth. But what I did like is they also added Ian Flint and Eric Ingerson, 2 blocking tight ends, an area where they really were weak this year. They didn't seal the edge very well. It felt like, Thomas Fedoni and Nate Borkircher sort of struggled at times. That's why we saw a lot of Luke Lindenmeyer. He was in there to help block. And I think guys like Eric Ingerson and Ian Flint are more known for their ability to move people than they are necessarily to go be pass catchers in space. And so I think it's good to add that power component to your tight end room and to really sort of try to build that up as well.
It's Mike Schaefer with us here talking recruiting, our signing day special. And Mike, you mentioned Gibson Pyle as an under-the-radar guy. Any other under-the-radar guys in this class that you think might surprise Husker fans earlier rather than later in their Husker career?
Yeah, I mean, one of the guys that I really like in this class is just down the road in Omaha, and Donovan Jones. I feel like we probably don't talk enough about him when we talk about the Metro guys. It's usually a lot of conversations about the Bell West guys or Caleb Benning. But Donovan Jones is really good for Omaha North, and he showed up at a Friday Night Lights camp. There was a little advance notice from Steve Warren to the Nebraska staff, like, hey, put some eyes on this guy. But I don't think that they thought that he was going to wow them the way that he did with his athleticism. And then he just went and had a monster senior year. And he had a really similar year to Caleb Benning. And, some of it is Omaha North didn't go as far in the playoffs, and I don't know that people are as familiar with him. But he's a really instinctive, bigger safety that had no problem coming down, laying the wood, liked to play in coverage, can pick off passes, played wide receiver, dynamic athlete. He's big and strong. I think he's a eventual replacement for Isaac Gifford in that rover role in this Tony White defense. And I just think he's one of these guys that people are going to see the name. They're not going to think a lot about. And then in a couple years, it's going to be, oh, Donovan Jones. Wow, look at that play. I legitimately think he is big arrow up in this class.
Mike Schaefer's with us. Schaefer, it's always fun to chat with you. It's great to have you back on with us, and appreciate you giving us time to do so. As we wind down, a thought here on just the overall development phase of the Rule program when you couple that with some of that natural God-given talent.
Yeah, I mean, they want to be builders. Like, they want to build this thing through the high school class, and I love to see that today. I mean, they only have one transfer portal addition in this class, and it's a guy who's only going to be a sophomore. So he's going to have 3 years with you. And this is how I think Nebraska is, if and when Nebraska returns to its place in college football landscape, it is going to be because they built it this way. I don't think there's quick fixes. I don't believe in the Deion Sanders style. I don't think Matt Rule ever believed in that style. And so they're going to find the players that they feel like fit their culture, fit their rooms, and build them from within. And I trust them to be able to do that. I really liked what we saw defensively last year. I think the offense will make a jump this year as well, with a little bit more consistency from the quarterback position. And even though Dylan Raiola is a true freshman, I think that he can open up different avenues of that offense that will allow guys like Malachi Coleman and Jalen Lloyd to flourish. So I think Nebraska is well on the path of being a team that builds from within. And I think they have a lot of really interesting pieces. There's some guys that we have not ever talked about because they've redshirted or they haven't had their opportunity, that they're going to have a chance for a big spring. And I think there's going to be some new and different names for us to banter about in the dog days of March.
You having a banquet beer tonight before the Nebraska game?
I am going to the basketball game where they, for whatever reason, did not accept my email that they needed to start selling banquets there, particularly over by section 112 where I'm at. But, I'll keep sending an email to Trev, and we'll see if eventually he acquiesces.
Who can have more banquets in a night? You or Rip from Yellowstone?
Well, I would not pit me against Rip in pretty much any scenario. I don't like my chances there, but I think Johnny Lawrence would take both of us under the table. So I'm gonna go with him. Those are the two guys that I would like to include myself in this category, but those are really the guys that have helped make Coors very trendy as of late.
I love it.
I just happen to be along for the ride.
No, you keep on riding. Shave, awesome coverage and work. Per usual, we'll do this again sooner than later. Thanks for making time tonight.
Yeah, Schmitty, this was great. First time we've been able to do this in, like 5 years or so.
Something like that, yeah.
It's been a while.
Pretty much since I joined the show.
Yeah.
So.
No, trust me, it went before you too. Like it's definitely been a while. So it's been great to get back here on 1480 and join you guys.
Appreciate you, Schaefer. Take care, brother. Thanks again. There he is, Mike Schaefer, at Mike J. Schaefer on Twitter. More Signing Day 2024 continues. Hail Varsity, powered by Cornhead Lager.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Good to have you in. Signing Day 2024, and this whole thing will be posted for you. Spotify, iTunes, Google Play. On Hail Varsity's page. Subscribe, tell us what you think. Also, the live version and posted on video for you. The YouTube channel with Hail Varsity. Big thanks to Mike Schaefer, Bill Doleman, Mr. Mike Babcock, Damon Benning, and yes, Evan Bland with the Omaha World Herald. Evan Bland joins us now at Evan Bland OWH on Twitter. And Evan, a lot of news going on for the past week or so. The Big Red get their ink to dry today, 26 plus some walk-ons. There's Chubba Purdy news going on right now. Where have you been? Where's the Evan tour taking you today?
Well, I spent a lot of the day in Logan, Iowa, actually talking with Grant Bricks and people around him for a story. I think people enjoy kind of getting to know him a little bit more. He's not maybe the number one headliner in the class, but he's top 4, I would think for sure. So was out there, followed along with the press conference, and been tracking the Chubba Purdy news here just a moment ago. So National Signing Day is not what it was. It's not your older brother's February day of sort of thing, but definitely a lot going on.
Quite a bit. You look at Nebraska, and of course the news is the flip from Dylan Raiola, and that was monumental. And then you look at some of the interior, right? Grant Bricks is right up there. That's a target for Donnie Raiola for quite a while. A 2-year plus process, and it took a semi, right, to sweeten the deal. At least the announcement video was pretty good. But overall, what's your impression here of not only the Raiola get, but just this foundational class, really a second class, a full year of recruitment by Rule and his staff?
Yeah, it's these are always the really interesting classes. Like you think about just the process of a coach coming in, and in the current climate, you have like a month to hold on to the guys who've been committed. You try to fill some gaps. You probably go to the transfer portal. This class is the opposite of that. I mean, this is a Matt Rule class where these guys have developed relationships with the coaches. The majority of this group has been committed since the summer. And then obviously they add some pieces late. And it feels like they did a good job addressing immediate needs. They did a good job building up long-term, like I think especially along the offensive line. This is a class, once you get beyond Raiola and Carter Nelson, where you can see potentially them having multiple starters out of this group as soon as 2025 or 2026. And so I think that's a place that I would start. You look at Nebraska's ability to this point to retain players relative to much of college football. And I think you see a lot of potential there in this class, too, when you talk about 5 or 6 legacy players, 8 in-state players overall, guys who just understand the importance of what this program means to this state and what it's all about. There's just not nearly as much of sort of having to upload culture and expectations when so many of these guys grew up with it. And typically those are the guys who tend to stay a little longer and be a little bit more invested as well. So it's hard to nitpick too much of this class. Maybe that they missed out on a running back. Maybe that there's no obvious middle linebacker, although I think you could probably see a few guys develop into that, like a Vincent Shavers type. But overall, I mean, just a deep class, a lot of players, and I think a lot of upside for guys that could pop either as soon as next year or down the road.
Evan, are you surprised that as of right now, there's only one portal pickup for the Huskers in Bly Hill? And Bly Hill was an FCS kid that played 1 season at corner. Now he's making the move up to Nebraska. Are you surprised he's the only portal pickup as of right now?
Well, it's definitely a paradigm shift when you think about 12 last year and then 15 the cycle before. So that's sort of been what we're used to around here is a lot of movement there. But I think first of all, it's in keeping with what Matt Rule and his staff want to do. They've said 90% high school prospects and then supplement that out of the portal. And then I think, as he said in his press conference today, they've sort of had their own portal this year. I mean, they got Bryce Benhart back out of the portal, and Ben Scott and Ty Robinson and John Bullock and Isaac Gifford. Like, these are guys essentially that were portal wins in a sense, because they could have gone on into the NFL draft process. They could have looked elsewhere and commanded a lot of attention and resources and that sort of thing. And so when you have guys of that caliber that say, yeah, I'll come back for a 5th year, or I'll come back for a 6th year, then you're not having to react and go into the de facto free agent market to try to fill those gaps. So I think that's been a lot of it. And again, they just feel good about the high school guys that they have. So you add all that up, along with the fact that they're roughly at about 100 scholarship players. They need to get down to 85 by fall camp. And there's just not a lot of room to speculate either. So if you're not addressing an immediate need, or there's not a slam dunk, game-changing sort of talent in there, you're not really, if you're Nebraska, in a position where you can sort of speculate on players out of the portal right now.
Evan, is there an immediate need to go get another name for that quarterback room, another player, assuming Chubba Purdy's out the door? And I know that's Arizona 360 reporting that about 30 minutes ago or so. So say Chubba is gone, what next for Matt Rule? You've got three guys there, Kalen, Raiola, and Heinrich to compete. I don't know where things are at with Casey Thompson. Do you look for another addition here after Spring Bowl?
Well, first of all, you talk about breaking news, and in the moment I did get a confirmation from Chubba's dad that that's accurate. So yeah, he's moving on. But yeah, it's interesting because I kind of, if I were Purdy and I were kind of looking at his situation, I mean, yeah, you have Raiola ahead of you there, potentially, probably. But you're also sort of the resident veteran in the room. I mean, you've got 4 years of college football under your belt. Yeah, you fought through injuries, but you're at a place with some stability now. You're at a place where you can maybe go into the second year of an offense and move forward with that. And he obviously felt differently and is looking, you would imagine, at more of a starting opportunity elsewhere. But I mean, yeah, it is a situation now where if you're Nebraska, I think you probably want to look at a veteran quarterback type, if for no other reason than to be sort of a mentor, or maybe an insurance policy, because you've got now two true freshman scholarship players. You've got Heinrich Harburg, who's got a lot of talent, a lot of big arm, but I don't know that his skill set is what you're looking for, the way that Nebraska's offense is going to start tilting toward next year. So it might behoove Nebraska to bring in somebody who isn't necessarily intent on having to be the starter, someone who's willing to compete, and if he is beaten out, is willing to be a good teammate and an insurance policy and that sort of thing. So I think this move by Purdy does open the door further for that possibility. I still think receiver's a spot you're going to see Nebraska target, whether that's Julian Fleming, who has been here on an official visit but looks like he's a Penn State lean, or somebody else. I think that's something that we've learned in a few years of the free transfer era, is that there's always talented receivers out there, and Nebraska's experienced that firsthand the last few years as well. So I think those would be two positions, potentially running back, depending on who's available and who's willing to listen. But I think the shopping list overall is pretty short, but those key few offensive pieces I think are still out there.
Evan, when you talk about offensive pieces, do you think any of the incoming freshmen, the guys in this 2024 class, could be guys that, similar to Malachi Coleman and similar to Jalen Lloyd, could be getting some playing time by the end of their freshman year? Are there any names that stand out among this current class?
Well, you got to do some projecting, right? I mean, you think about a year ago, I don't know that people thought Jalen Lloyd would do what he did, and it took a lot of injuries to sort of pave the way for him to get out there. So, potentially, I think receiver could be another spot where you still have a lot of young guys. Keelan Smith had an awfully impressive year in Missouri. That's somebody that I think you would have to look at. But, again, we've learned, it's hard, especially the way that Nebraska wants to play offense, for a true freshman receiver to come in and make a big difference right away. And so if it's not that position, you kind of feel like tight end is still pretty well spoken for with Thomas Fidone and Nate Borkercher. That seems like a hard position for a true freshman to crack. And like we said, they don't have a running back in the class. So, I mean, Raiola is the obvious candidate at quarterback to be somebody there. But I think that kind of speaks to where this program is going, is that you don't really see a lot of guys in this class that you point to and say Nebraska needs them right now. And I think that's because they have depth at those spots. I think of offensive line where 3 or 4 years ago, you're starting guys like Turner Corcoran as a true freshman, or Bryce Benhart, Teddy Prohaska. And right now that position's in such a place to where, you can see these guys redshirting, disappearing for a couple of years as they grow their bodies and that sort of thing before they are able to roll out. So I think just the fact that there aren't a lot of players that you would put out there right away speaks less about maybe the talent that is in this class and more about the health of the program overall.
Real quick, Evan, before we say goodbye, and thanks for your time today and coverage, of course, with Signing Day 2024. Overall, what's the outlook for you moving forward? Not just spring, but beyond. What could this team be next season, even with a freshman quarterback that's highly touted, paired with the defense? What do you think Nebraska can do moving forward?
That's the next big question. I mean, now that the big fish is in the boat, now it becomes like, what do you do with him? Like, how do you develop him? How do you groom him and get him ready, whether that's on day one, whether that's midway through the season, whatever it might be. I think back to what Rule said earlier this month, which was one of their primary off-season priorities is going to be putting whoever is the quarterback in the best position to succeed. And that, includes a whole bunch of stuff from how you surround them with talent to the play calls that you put out there, the style of offense that you run, how much you expose them in the running game, all these different things. And so I think that's one of the big missions this offseason is what does the offense look like? How do you put that quarterback in the best position to succeed? And then you pair that with a defense that we saw looked awfully good at times last year. And maybe the one area that they came up short was enforcing takeaways. And so if that defense can take a step in what is becoming a veteran black shirts unit, and you have an offense that's a little bit more set in what it is, that avoids risk a little more than it did last year, I think that's a recipe for certainly getting back to a bowl game. And then beyond that, you don't know. I mean, you're talking about trying to finish in the top 12 nationally to get into the college football playoffs starting next year. And if you can get into that 9 or 10 win range, I think we're seeing that's when things really start to get interesting.
Evan, we'll check in the new year. Thanks for the time, bud.
Merry Christmas, guys.
Hail Varsity Radio is live. Now, back to Schmitty.
Schmitty's a great guy, but he don't have a brain.
And Elijah.
You want me to speak? When I point at you, yeah.
On Hail Varsity Radio.
Open phones here the final 20 minutes. We'll hear from Dylan Raiola. We'll hear from Matt Rule. And open phones for you the next 20 minutes, 489-1240, 800-825-5865. You look at some of the Big Ten recruiting rankings, fifth quarter tailgate, putting this in on the stream with the Hail Varsity YouTube channel. Bottom four, Michigan State, Indiana, UCLA, Northwestern. I think Northwestern coming in at number 97. I think UCLA was 68. You had Indiana somewhere into the 50s, and Sparty, I think, came in at 53rd, if I remember correctly. So there is that. It's either kind of feast or famine. Steven checks in. He is right. You grow inside out. Lines of scrimmage are paramount in the Big Ten. But news of the day, aside from Nebraska inking 26 kids, plus some really strong walk-ons, you have Chubba Purdy in the portal. Evan Bland breaking that just about 7 minutes ago. Paul has been on hold. Paul, go for it. Thanks for calling in. Welcome into Hail Varsity.
Hey, guys, two questions. Hearing a lot of rumors, can you report anything about a change in the quarterback coaching?
I know the two names we've talked about for a week. One is Christensen. That was the quarterback coach. He's a private quarterback coach with not only Patrick Mahomes, but also Dylan Raiola, Baker Mayfield. I know he has been on campus.
And I've also heard in recent days, no confirmation of this, so that he may have just been advising.
He just might have
role.
been a part of the let's go kick the tires on Nebraska.
Yes, yeah.
So that's the name, Christensen, and then, God, I keep messing his name up, the former Baylor OC and quarterbacks coach.
Do you think it's likely that Satterfield's going to have to accept someone taking over the quarterback room?
I think that's how Sats worked. I mean, I don't know that he worked with quarterbacks in many of his stops. I think he's just kind of been a co-OC, and you've had him on staff before with Rule, where he's worked with tight ends or some other position, assistant offensive line. You've always had a quarterback coach. Shouldn't say always, but you've had a quarterback coach many times with him on staff with Rule.
And it should be noted, the name you're looking for, Glenn Thomas.
I had it written down. I couldn't see it through my notes. So Glenn Thomas is the other name we've
currently
heard.
with the Steelers. You do wonder, is that something that gets announced after the season?
Right. And Rule didn't want to dive into it today. So yeah, I think they are looking hard at the quarterback coach.
Second, I'm ecstatic that we got Raiola and Kalen to sign.
Amen.
And while I'm concerned about the possibility losing Purdy,
he is gone.
Don't we have to accept that with only an 85 scholarship limit, we have to lose some of the scholarship players currently on the roster?
Yeah, or you get creative with, okay, you're not on scholarship, but here's your NIL. This is, as Lloyd and Harry would say, that's as good as money. So your NIL could cover that your room board and then some. So it can work out. You can have your own NIL set up that would be better or greater than your scholarship.
And it should be noted, just because Chubba's in the portal doesn't mean
he's
gone.
out the door.
You can see the writing on the wall, though, considering how he finished last year, the pedigree. I feel like somebody's going to go want to scoop up a guy like Chubba.
You fight like hell to keep him if you're Nebraska.
Yeah.
I really am anxious to see a full year of Chubba Purdy, healthy and ready to go. I really liked what I saw in the glimpses. Turnovers obviously take better care of the ball, but he looked like a different quarterback this season than previous years at Nebraska.
Well, only one thing to say, go Big Red.
Paul, appreciate it. Thanks for the phone call. 489-1240 or 800-825-5865. Who else is on the horn?
John's on the line.
John, thanks for calling. Go ahead.
Yeah, I want to say to you and your whole staff, just have a safe and happy holiday season. I enjoy listening to you. Usually I listen and you answer most of my questions. What is the final money ticket on our quarterback? And I guess my other question, like you were saying, you don't need a scholarship. I say, hell with the scholarship. Just give me, the likeness money, like
give me
that.
the apartment. Give me the car.
Yeah, well,
give me the stipend.
I guess my question is, how much money could a team play? I mean, could a team come in and spend $100 million a year on players? I mean, there's no end to it. I mean, the way I see it right now.
Presumably you could, but you got to get Uncle Warren Buffett on board, or be a Boone Pickens descendant to make that a reality. I don't, John, thanks for the phone call. Appreciate you listening, man, and the kind words. Merry Christmas to you. The thought is this: whatever the Zeros say, I don't have the books.
We probably won't ever get the
books.
We
won't ever get the books on what a NIL package is for a Jeff Sims, a Casey Thompson, a Dylan Raiola. Don't know. I can speculate, and that is not to be reckless. I can tell you that previous numbers were maybe around $500,000, 150,000. Your going rate is at $250,000 per semester. You're in college. If you're a high-end quarterback, you do the math, you're there 8 to 9 semesters total. There's your $1 to $2 million window. That's kind of the market Matt Rule referenced here back in November. That's my best guess. That's my map right now. Chubba Purdy in the portal. Does he stay in the portal? I think it's a loss for Nebraska. Because I think Chubba's best football days are ahead of him. That could still be at Nebraska, but right now it's looking like it's going to be somewhere else where he's healthy, where he's calm, where he's confident. How about that speed and arm you saw from him when he was in the flow, right? I mean, kind of pushed into duty and finally healthy, still playing with that sports hernia. So right now he's recovering from said surgery, but there's going to be suitors for him. Absolutely. Does Nebraska need to go somewhere else, Elijah? Yes, you've got Raiola. I'm saying, is there also somebody beyond Harburg, you look at quarterback. We don't know where things are at or if things are moving in a direction where Casey Thompson is a viable backup option or could be a starting option. You heard Matt Rule talk today about nothing is given. You got to go take it. You got to go earn it. So
I feel like if Casey would have been coming here, I think we would have known that by today. And maybe it took a move like Chubba hitting the transfer portal for that to be
Is that a domino, though? Is Chubba in the portal a reaction to Casey Thompson maybe running it back?
And that's possible, but what I will say is I think Nebraska has bigger needs on their current roster than an insurance policy quarterback. I think I look at running back, I look at wide receiver, and I look at those and I say if Nebraska was giving out a scholarship spot to somebody, I think that may be more important than an insurance policy quarterback. I think the insurance policy quarterback is good to have, but you already are in a scholarship crunch. And is the luxury of an insurance policy quarterback what you really, really need within this offense if you want to find success next season? I don't know.
Well, I'm just saying if the guy that you think goes out and wins the job gets dinged or isn't ready, you still got to go win ball games with somebody behind center. You've got a real talent and maestro, we think, coming in. But you've seen how many Nebraska quarterbacks played last year.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Thanks for spending time. Thanks for hanging out with us on Signing Day 2024. Full show going to be reposted for you. The Hail Varsity YouTube channel, Hail Varsity Radio, Twitter at HVarsity Radio. Give the show a follow. Give Elijah a follow at Herbalessence at Schmidt_radio. It's where I'm at on Twitter or X or whatever the hell you call it. And we'll be back at you tomorrow at 4. Big thanks to all our guests. Let's get to Jim before we wind down. Jim, thanks for calling. Go ahead.
Sure. You guys have a great show. I just, it's just a pleasure for me to see a coach that, whether he was coaching high school ball or college or pro or whatever, the guy knows how to treat people. And that's obvious with, we can talk about the recruits and who he's getting and this and that, but and the coaching staff that a guy like that brings in, he's got it straight across the shoulders, and he's a perfect fit for Nebraska. And I can't see anything but this team going up. So I'll just sit back and listen, guys. Appreciate it.
Hey, Jim, appreciate you. Thanks for the kind words. Thanks for tuning in. Appreciate you listening into Hail Varsity and catching us up. Can we sneak in a little Dylan?
Yeah.
Let's sneak in a little Dylan. This is part of his coverage and his comments on Nebraska, and part of that reason for the flip from Dylan. You've seen it posted. Hear it from him.
I think it was a lot of prayer, a lot of discussion with my family. It was just something that I grew up in, and it's always tugging at my heart. So, I didn't want to ignore it, and I explored the option, and God put me in a position to make the decision to go to Nebraska.
So that was part of Dylan right after his signing day ceremony in Buford. A little bit more from Raiola when it comes to you heard the flip part. Now, how about the decision-making process, or is that what we just heard?
Oh, we just heard on the flip. We can go decision-making.
Okay, let's get to the decision-making.
I think it was one of the hardest decisions I had to make. People talk about a grown man decision. I think that was one of these, but it was hard. I really enjoyed getting to Coach Smart, his whole staff, Coach Bubba. And quite honestly, to leave a program like Georgia to go to a place like Nebraska, where people around the country forget how much of a great program Nebraska is, and I think, I can't wait to get in there with my teammates and get to work.
Last thought from Dylan Raiola. Why pick Nebraska?
I think everything about it. My legacy. My dad went there. I think just the fit overall, to be a part of something bigger than myself. And it was really just something I prayed about, and it really came to my heart, and it's something that I felt convicted about.
Well, good stuff from Dylan Raiola. Loaded show tomorrow. Charlie McBride, Mr. Blackshirt, will join us. We'll get Gary Barnett's take on Dylan Raiola and also the Buff recruiting class. Some flack on some of the who's who Dion is taking. Not quite the buzz that last year had. or at least some of the Louis that Deion brought with him. What did I see on social media today?
The kid in his announcement video had a weed and a gun on the table.
Yeah, that quite frankly tops the hat choice. All right, I've got the Buffs. I've got Miami. I have LSU. I have Bama. I've got an ounce, and I have a Glock.
Honestly,
that's the mother of all recruiting tables.
That's honestly 5-star material to me. Give that kid the bump up.
Careful about asking for a bump, all right? just saying that. Talk to you tomorrow at 4. Thanks to Damon Benning, Bill Doleman, Mike Babcock, Evan Bland, Mike Schaefer. Talk to you tomorrow at 4 on Hail Varsity.